Welcome, and for all things Halloween, this is hauntformer, also known as Mac Ralston. Hey, how you doing? And welcome back to the Campfire Storytelling Podcast. It's good to be back already. My first outing in this strange, bizarre little adventure of mine proved to be fairly positive, according to a lot of you guys. I reviewed the new movie Don't Worry Darling, and a lot of people said to continue doing the podcast, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. Now, whereas Don't Worry Darling is a topical subject, I suppose, today, just like Sony in 2018, I am going to be digging up the remnants of the age-old, certified hood classic, Slenderman. Yes. Good old Slenderman. Today, we're going to be taking another look at the 2018 Slenderman movie, which was a film that I reviewed back when it came out, actually, in the August of 2018 on my channel with mixed thoughts and opinions. But I do have a new opinion, having watched it for the second time. It sucks. Not only does it suck, but it might quite possibly be one of the worst movies I've ever seen. And in order to explain why, I gotta take you all the way back to the good old days. Back when I was just a wee little tyke, and YouTube was still in its infancy, and the internet was still trying to figure out what the frick was going on. That's right, I am talking about the late 2000s, when a guy by the name of Victor Surge, also known as Eric Knudsen, I think that's how you pronounce it, uploaded some photoshopped, creepy images to the Something Awful forums. You all know where I'm going with this. He created Slenderman. Kind of the face, for lack of a better term, of what we now know as Creepypasta. Now, because this podcast has to do heavily with storytelling, and given that I am an author on the Creepypasta wiki, I will be going more into depth about Creepypasta and my stances on the whole range of Creepypasta characters and the state of Creepypasta. I'm going to do that in a future installment, so I'm not going to dive too deeply into that. But whereas kind of the mainstayers in Creepypasta have always been kind of Jeff the Killer, or Eyeless Jack, or I don't know, Ben Drowned, or Smile Dog, or whatever, I really do feel like Slenderman has been the one that has consistently remained an iconic figure. Because even old Jeffy, which I will eventually talk about one day, has seen some harsh criticism. Slenderman, on the other hand, while he has certainly faded from the limelight quite a ways away, still proves to be an interesting character. There are still games being made about Slenderman to this day, and he hasn't quite been as corrupted, though a lot of the fan art and constant posting about him definitely has brought his legendary status down a tad. But Slenderman was really popular during the late 2000s, early kind of 2010s, if you will, when they made the Slenderman video games. There are a lot of different ones. Slender the 8 Pages comes to mind. Also Slender the Arrival. Awesome game, by the way. Perhaps I'll play it on the channel sometime. And of course, this is when Marble Hornets came out. Now, I am planning to do, I don't know if it's released at the time of recording this video or whenever I upload this, but I am planning to do a review on Marble Hornets, because it's a series that's near and dear to me. Can't talk tonight. A series that's really important to me, and I just love it. I have watched it fully through twice, and I got into the To the Ark kind of spin-off as well. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I'll try to cover that when I talk about Marble Hornets. Marble Hornets is a great show, and it was made on the fly, on a small budget, small cast, and proved to be really successful. On the other hand, Slenderman the movie, released by Sony Pictures and directed by Sylvian White, and a screenplay by David Burke, and I guess technically Victor Surge, Eric Nunson, kinda, probably more story by credit there, did not prove to be as successful, which is unfortunate because this movie was one of the kind of chances, I guess, for the little world of creepypasta on YouTube and on the internet, on the wikis, on the various sites, what have you, to get a mainstay in the public eye. Now, there have been some exceptions, of course. I really love the heck out of Channel Zero. Definitely recommend you check it out. And there have been some interesting adaptations over the years. Marble Hornets, in fact, made a film about Slenderman called Always Watching, which was a spin-off movie from a couple years back. And I haven't watched it in some time. Perhaps I'll give it a chance again. I remember enjoying it, but not nearly as much as the show, which I think is the general consensus about the movie. But, you know, there's a lot more you can get down to in a show versus an hour-and-a-half movie, so I understand that. When Slenderman, this 2018 movie, was coming out, I remember being so excited, so incredibly excited, on the edge of my seat to see this movie. Also incredibly worried, because I didn't want them to ruin this character that I had grown to love. And something that kind of peeved me, and it really does now having rewatched the movie, not that anyone really cares anymore, but to me, these internet monsters, these creepypasta type characters, were something that was made by the little guy, you know? Victor Surge was just some dude editing Photoshop images, happened to strike gold with his character creation. And I think that's kind of the Russian roulette kind of wheel spin that a lot of creators take to see if their intellectual property, for lack of a better term, perhaps, gets recognized. And I think a lot of creators just want to see their stuff be appreciated and enjoyed, especially if it's in the entertainment industry or in the artful industry. But it seemed like the Sony studio, in addition to the filmmakers for this movie and the producers, were just sucking anything out of this character. A character of the people. I don't mean to make Slenderman sound that important, but really, he was made and created not just by... I mean, Eric Nunson certainly started it, but there were a lot of different storytellers and creators that made stories and additions to the mythos. I remember even watching those Slenderman versus Jeff the Killer narration videos by, like, Mr. Creepypasta, unironically at the time, mind you. So it was a big deal to me. And so to see this character get brought to the big screen was really exciting for both me and a lot of other people. And the movie sucked. When I saw it, I really wanted to like it. I gave it the benefit of the doubt in my review. And some of the points I make in my original YouTube video ring true. I think some of the imagery in the movie is a little bit spooky. There are some interesting shots, I suppose, that are composed. And the actor, his name is escaping me. I think it's like Javier or something. The actor that actually plays Slenderman, he also played the Crooked Man in The Conjuring, and he was in It as the leper, and several other really tall, lanky type of characters. He does a really cool job being Slenderman. I mean, I love practical effects and makeup as much as the next guy. But other than those few praises, the movie really falls flat. Really falls flat in so many ways. The only other praise I can think of is a sequence where one of the characters, I don't remember all their names, one of the characters, her face is removed, like Slenderman, and she kind of goes, like mumbles and runs around in a library. Which, first of all, why is a teen girl in the library on the computer when she has a laptop at home? Doesn't make any sense. Nothing in this movie makes any sense, and I don't know if the screenwriter just thought that the audience was going to be dumb kids who didn't care and just wanted to see Spooky Man pop out, or whatever the case might be, but it frustrates me and saddens me a bit, because I think there are so many talented authors on the internet that would love to create stories based off of characters that they love, like Slenderman. I, for one, would have loved to craft a really cool story about this character. But instead, we have David Burke and Sylvian White to both write the screenplay and direct the film respectively. Now, personally, I have nothing against either of these folks. No idea really who they are, in fact. Sylvian White has directed a couple episodes of various television shows and such, like NCIS and what have you. And David Burke really hasn't done much of anything at all. Has had some award nominations for screenplays, including a recent movie that got a pretty positive score on Rotten Tomatoes, so I'm glad to see that his talent is improving. But it stands that there's not really a lot from either of these gentlemen to suggest that they were ready to take on a Slenderman movie. Now, I think the first problem with a Slenderman movie in 2018 is that it was a Slenderman movie in 2018. Slenderman was well past his prime, even if you want to give him till 2013. I think 2014, 2015, really, he was fading out of the limelight. And in 2018, I remember when the trailer dropped, people were going, what? Slenderman, that thing from like 10 years ago, it seemed? That was exactly the vibe. So, unless there were like kids playing Slenderman Roblox games that were still in the know, aside from the interesting corner of the internet like me, who loves this stuff consistently, I don't think there was quite the appetite for a Slenderman movie. On top of that, I really feel like there are so many different and unique stories you could tell in this mythos. Marble Hornets kind of talked about the proxy side of it and what happens when Slenderman gets in someone's head. Talks about the found footage aspect of the mythos, kind of the corruption of digital media, if you will, and physical media, for that matter. And again, that's a weird thing that this movie was not found footage. I'm not quite sure why. There are certainly scenes and sequences that make me wonder that they wanted it to be found footage, but ended up going a different direction. Sounds like a studio thing. But at any rate, this movie just feels like it was thrown together, and not by anyone who really loved the source of it. The basic idea of Slenderman, the movie, not the thing, is that you have these 4 high school kids. I don't know exactly how old they are. I think they're high schoolers. Named Haley, Chloe, Ren, and Katie. And I only know that because I looked it up. I wouldn't really call them characters. They're more of placeholders for plot purposes. They go to school, and they like boys, as girls do, at least when written by a, 40-year-old man. They like boys, and they decide to do what the boys are doing at their sleepover, because the boys are having a sleepover the same night as the girls are, and they decide to summon Slenderman, which I didn't know that Slenderman could be summoned in the mythos. I wasn't quite sure of that, but apparently he can. And apparently he has been in this movie. Very Ring-esque style. Almost verbatim. And that was a big turnoff for me when I originally saw this movie, and it still holds true. Or should I say, rings true. But you have this really interesting mythos that's already been established online, and then you just throw in the ring for no other reason. And I think it's funny because I'm pretty sure Sony also would later do that Rings movie like a year or two after this. So they were really trying to bank on that early 2000s, late 90s nostalgia at this time. But anyways, you have these high schoolers, they summon Slenderman, they start going missing, and they start seeing him everywhere, blah 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 blah, dying, death. Now, I should note at this point in this discussion that a lot of this movie seemed to have changed from trailer to the big screen, to the theaters. And I think one of the reasons for that was the real-life tragedy that had to do with good old Slenderman, or maybe bad Slenderman, I should say. Now, this was obviously a really sad thing to hear about in the news. I still remember hearing about it, many years ago. I can't remember the exact year. I think it was 2014, 2016 that this happened. Two friends, quote-unquote, not really friends, brought their friend, again, quote-unquote, out into the woods and stabbed her in the name of Slenderman. Thank God she did not die or succumb to her injuries. She healed and is okay. However, it was definitely a sore spot. So much so that only a few years later, in 2016, so I suppose the stabbing occurred in 2014, aforementionedly, a documentary called Beware the Slenderman was released about this stabbing fiasco from the minds of these mentally ill children. But that whole event, I think, caused a kerfuffle, if you will, for Sony, not wanting to cause any outcry at their movie, not trying to ruffle any feathers. So they took a lot of the violent moments out of the movie, because they're seen in the trailer. There's a sequence where one of the characters, I want to say her name was Chloe. In the trailer, you can see her holding a scalpel, like, up to her eye or something, like she's gonna potentially stab herself, and obviously that was removed from the movie. It is a bit strange to consider that they were so afraid of keeping this stuff in the film, when, again, we have to realize that Slenderman, spoiler alert, is not real. It would be like if someone was attacked by a person wearing a ghost face mask, and that somehow causing the Scream franchise to get disrupted. Now, I'm not saying that's not a terrible thing. Obviously, this was a terrible tragedy. But at the same time, I would like to think anyways, that audiences would understand that it's a movie and not trying to be based off this real-life thing. But then again, the movie is so late in the game that it almost seems like they're leeching off of this real-life tragedy, even though I assume that was not the case. Perhaps this movie was in the works for a long time, and they had rights issues with Victor Surge. Not quite sure of the entire backstory, but it basically accumulates to this movie that doesn't make any sense. These kids go missing, their friends start dying, and they don't really seem to care. No one in this movie seems to care about anything. Very opening of the movie, you have these girls sitting on the high school bleachers, talking about who knows what, animal videos or something. That's what it seemed like, because that's what David Burke wants to write his teeny bopper characters to talk about, animal videos. They're then walking down the hallway, talking about how cute boys are, whatever, yada yada yada. They decide to have a slumber party, and at the slumber party, out of nowhere, they get the idea to summon Slenderman. It's never mentioned, there's no foreshadow of Slenderman. Just goes from talking about school and boys to talking about Slenderman. They pull up this video, which looks like it's on the dark web or something. I mean, I assume it's not because I just Googled it. And they watch this video, which is of the woods. Now, to me, as a rational human being, at least I like to think I am. Perhaps I'm not, because I am talking about the Slenderman movie. But, to me, if I watch a video of random shots of trees, I would probably laugh it off and have a good night. These girls take this video incredibly seriously. So much so that one of their friends, again, Chloe, I'm pretty sure, makes fun of them for believing in it. The following day, or whenever this is, I don't know the time jumps because this movie is very confusing, they go on a field trip, and one of their friends disappears into the woods, never to be seen again. Now, we find out later that the night before, she was trying to summon Slenderman out in the woods at night, and I'm assuming he shows up because she, like, drops the camera found footage style. Even though it seems odd that Slenderman would abduct her that night and then bring her back home for her to go on a field trip to then get abducted again. Why didn't he just abduct her the first time? Why does he let her get attacked twice? Does she drop the camera and run away? I don't really know. And that's one of the problems with the movie, is the movie doesn't follow its own logic. Case in point, the girls at the beginning all watch this Slenderman summoning video. Okay, not quite the mythos I want, but I can follow that. They watch a video, it summons this creature. Later in the movie, however, the main character's younger sister watches the video as well, and immediately gets seizures and has to go to the hospital where she may die because the seizures are so bad or something. That's when, spoiler alert, this is an old movie that you probably don't care about, so whatever, her sister offers herself up as a sacrifice to Slenderman and morphs into a tree, Animorph style. Now, it is a cool kind of special effect, I guess, with the CGI kind of tree thing taking over her. You have Slenderman pulling her through the woods. But it doesn't make any sense why any of that happens. Why does the younger sister get seizures when all the other kids seemed fine? You even have the boyfriend, boy love interest date character watching the video, and he acts very neurotic, despite all of the other characters seeming more or less okay after watching the movie. It's weird, and I'm not sure why that inconsistency is there, but there are so many others. Other example, we lose one of our characters about 10 minutes into the movie. This girl, Katie. Alright? Well, not too much longer later, the three girls try to sacrifice some personal objects of theirs into the woods, in the woods to Slenderman. And I thought this would be an interesting scene to kind of show some backstory to the characters. One of them mentions having a picture, their like only picture with them and their father, and doesn't go anywhere. It's like barely mentioned. It's like breezed over. That's because these aren't really characters. They are placeholders for Slenderman to catch. And Slenderman, mind you, if you really want to see him in the movie, there's a highlight reel on YouTube. He is in the movie for approximately 3.5 minutes of this hour-and-a-half movie. So, hour and 40-minute movie, excuse me. So, yeah, you're really getting some Slender goodness for 3 minutes. Just watch Marble Hornets, folks. Anyways, I stand to say they're trying to sacrifice these objects to Slenderman. Doesn't work, and so they try to run away. One of their friends, I think her name is Chloe, sees Slenderman and kind of goes in this like daze because of it. Later on in the movie, her friends attempt to try to go by her house and see what she's up to, I guess, because she was out of the movie for like half an hour. She's just standing there. And they try to hey, are you awake? Wave their hands in front of the window. She doesn't respond, and so they shrug it off and go, oh, that was weird. And then never mention her again in the story. She's just written out. She's just done. Kind of same can be said for the first character, Katie. The first little bit of the movie, they are trying to figure out, where she went. They blame Slenderman a little too quickly. They don't offer any other suggestion. There's no mention of like a boyfriend maybe or a motive outside of Slenderman. It's just the police don't have any leads right now, which I don't know how they know that information. But okay. The police have no leads right now, so it must be Slenderman. Because who else? There we go. Problem solved. Plot confirmed. So none of that makes sense. On top of that, you have Katie's dad, the girl who goes missing first, her dad, breaks in to these younger girls' house, okay? And knocks on the door, starts banging on the door. The door is locked, and the girls are like looking around all scared. This guy then says, hey, open the door or something. And then they do it. They just open the door for this guy. They open the door, and he's facing backwards for no reason, just to be spooky, like it's a shot from Annabelle. Then he turns around and starts going nuts about, you let this paranormal stuff affect my daughter, this is all your fault. I don't know if he just believed in Slenderman outright, or thought that she got abducted, or whatever the case, but it's very heavily implied on the nose that he knows about Slenderman, because later on we see drawings of Slenderman in her room. It's not collected as evidence by the police. In fact, her laptop is still in her closet. So it seems like the police just didn't care. So I don't know how they have no leads when they didn't even check her dumb laptop. And if they did, they would have found this spooky dark web website where the girls chat with this mysterious user that says they know how to stop Slenderman from getting you. So that doesn't make sense either. On top of that, this dad who just broke into these kids' house is apparently apprehended by the police in one scene, and in the very next scene, he's back at home sipping on a beer. So I guess they just let him go? I mean, he broke into a house where young girls were present, and I guess they were just cool with it. Okay. And that leads me to another thing, which is there are no parents in this movie. I don't know if the screenplay just called for, yeah, just take the parents out, or if they thought that none of these girls had parents, but they all live in these pretty lavished houses, like 2-story houses with multiple bedrooms, and they're just there by themselves. There are some parents toward the end of the movie, but they're barely mentioned throughout this entire thing. There's really nothing to latch on to. And, again, nothing makes any sense. If there was some logic to Slenderman, some logic to how you got abducted by him, how you could stop him, something for the audience to follow, even if the characters were bare bones, which they already are, it still doesn't justify this movie existing. Had you had this really lore-intensive movie, which gave characters a backseat, but really focused on, this is how Slenderman works, this is what you do, here's his history, all this stuff, blah, 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 blah. Then I could say, alright, the characters are a little weak, but, you get this pretty interesting look into this character of Slenderman. But there's no mythology, there's no character progression of any kind. There's just nothing. There are scenes that happen to get to the next scene, to have a little jump scare from Slenderman in the background, or a shadow somewhere. You might see a tree out the window, perhaps, or the outlined silhouette of a person who's just walking by and happens to be tall and lanky. And after multiple scenes in a sequence, the movie ends. And that's Slenderman. I find it really bizarre that this is what we ended up with. Out of everything that we could have had with Slenderman, this was the final result. It's just upsetting. It's just really upsetting. The dialogue is overall pretty cringy. The plot doesn't make any sense. The characters are extremely bland and mild. There's no one to latch on to. I didn't feel for any of these characters, which is really upsetting. At least give me one. Just one. Not asking for much. Just give me a little bit of depth. If they would have even taken 5 minutes when they were going to do their scene of burning stuff and had a little ultimatum, you know, each of them talking about their pasts and why it's hard for them to burn these objects, or why they're afraid. They're like saying, I don't want Slenderman to get my sister. I'd rather take me. Something. Give me something for these characters. There's just nothing. And there's nothing for Slenderman either. It's just a big old bowl of nothing. The movie is faceless, just like Slendy himself, and I really wish that in the future we could get an actual Slenderman movie. Sony, if you're listening to this, which you aren't, I would love to give it a whirl. Heck, let the wiki do it for ya. We love this kind of stuff. This is what we do. And it's funny, too, because there's an actual scene in the movie where the characters scroll through Wikipedia and, like, the Creepypasta wiki, or at least a knockoff version of it, to look at pictures and fan art of Slenderman, including the original Victor Surge art photoshops, which was kind of a nice homage, but in the end, it just seemed kind of hollow. Anyways, that was a lot of rambling. Hopefully that all made sense. I guess I was pretty passionate about Slenderman, which I'm not sure why. It's just a movie from 2018, but it's less about the movie itself, more of the point that this is what we got. But that being said, I would love to talk about more creepypastas in the future, and more movies, so if you have something you want me to talk about in depth, then drop a comment below. Thank you so much for listening. Hope you'll subscribe or consider it. And remember, for all things Halloween, this is hauntformer.